And welcome back to the Japan Politics Podcast. And this week I want to talk in particular and just really focus in on the rice crisis in Japan and just how it's continuing to affect politics in Japan, and it's continuing to be so impactful, this crisis, even all these months later since the problems began. So to give a very brief refresh, in the previous year there was some difficulties with the weather and other general factors, and that's now impacted on the supply of rice that's able to make it out into Japan. It means that rice, which obviously is a key staple of Japan, it's really important for a lot of dishes. It's what a lot of tourists expect when they arrive in Japan to try. It's affecting all of that, and as a result, there's scarcity in the shops and it's more expensive. Now, the government tried to release a stockpile. That really has not fully addressed the problem, and to make things even worse, the Japanese farming minister came out with a joke. He was giving a speech and he said something to the effect of, well, I've never had to buy rice because my constituents get it for me. Now, this might well be true. You could imagine that his constituents, particularly as he's a farming minister, might well give him rice as a gift. But it's very ill-considered. A crisis is going on, a rice crisis is going on right now, to make such a joke, as people are struggling to buy it, and it's affecting the cost of living, the ability of people to get rice, if they can even find it in the shops. And to make that joke, well, it's already affecting the LDP's popularity, and there's a looming election coming up in July, very ill-considered, a bit Marie Antoinette-ish. So he then had to resign, the farming minister, as a result of that, and it really has just elevated this crisis even further, and it opens the LDP up to all sort of accusations that they're not taking this seriously enough, that they're out of touch. And the polling also came out around the same time, showing that the majority of people do not approve of how the government is handling this crisis. They do not think they're doing enough. So very serious situation, this. As I say, with these upper house elections coming up, it's really a real problem for the LDP, the governing party. Now, they've tried to respond to this, and this seems to be a big moment for Koizumi Jr. This is Koizumi Shinjiro. He's the son of a former PM, and he finished third in the election that made Ishiba the leader of the LDP and thus Prime Minister. I believe that's the first time he ran for PM. He got a respectable third result, and you could even say, because he appeared to have pushed his supporters to vote towards Ishiba, that you could even argue he's a sort of kingmaker. So although third is maybe on the face of it doesn't sound that impressive, for a first run and for a fairly young man, I speculated before that maybe this is a possible future player who might run for PM again and who sort of left his calling card. And now he's been given the big job. Now, a lot of people in the past about Koizumi have said, he's got the profile, he's young, he's fresh-faced, he's the son of a former prime minister, which often a lot of prime ministers of Japan are sons of former prime ministers, but it gives him immediate profile. He's media-friendly. He seems to have everything, but some people have said maybe he perhaps, despite being the environmental minister previously, he lacks maybe just the CV of a prime minister. Maybe he needs like the big ministerial job. Well, if that's true, then this is his moment, certainly. He's been given possibly the pivotal job of the moment. He's replaced him, and he's become the new farming minister of Japan in the middle of this rice crisis. And so this is really his moment to sort of step up and prove himself. And if he does a good job at this and manages to be pivotal and turn the crisis around, then he really could be the next, a key next contender for prime minister. And I've said before, there's not really at the moment Seinai Takeichi, as people are repeatedly after the gift scandal and given the problems the LDP and the government are having. There's a lot of speculation about how long Ishiba will last in the job, and people saying, oh, will he last out this term? Is he going to even make it to the next election? And speculation that he might face a no-confidence vote even in the near future. Well, Seinai Takeichi might be the front runner at the moment, but given the fact that the LDP faction of the Abe faction, which she's a part of, has been quite diminished by scandal, and it's also lost some members in the previous election, and she's sort of the front runner by default, really, because she finished second and she's quite a prominent person. But I would suggest if he does a very good job, perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself, Koizumi, being young, already having a bit of a following, and representing a bit of a fresh start, but not being part of the Abe faction, if he does a good job here in the middle of a crisis and turns this rice situation around, then he really could be in a pivotal position to maybe even be the next Prime Minister of Japan. So this is certainly a big moment for him. And certainly he's going to want to throw absolutely everything at this, address the problem, both for, not even for just for ambition's sake, but for the survival of his party, of the LDP. Really, he has to take this very seriously and aggressively to turn around the rice crisis. Now, the tact he's taking is he's looking to very, aggressively, as I say, attack this and get the price of rice down. And there's been a bit of a bottleneck or whatever, but despite the fact that the government has released stockpiled rice before, it seems to not quite be getting to the shops and not quite getting to the end user quick enough to really dissipate the crisis. But his approach, one of the measures he's taking to address this, is he's now releasing effectively old stockpiled rice. So rice that's been stockpiled for some time is now going to be released to shops, and the plan is that it's going to be rice that's stockpiled from 2022, I believe, or at least part of it, and it's going to be released out. And the idea is that they're targeting to reduce the price in the shops for a 5 kilogram bag. They're aiming to get that down to 1,800 yen, so sort of a more reasonable price to where it is currently. And there's been a big moment where he's sort of really promoting this. I've seen articles about how you can cook this sort of slightly older rice. I've seen articles about recipes you can use. There's a little bit of, from a UK's perspective, a little bit of a rationing trend, if you remember back that far, of what rationing was like. Suggesting what recipes you can use, how you can get around this sort of older rice and adjust your diet to it. And there's been a photo of the leadership of the LDP, some big figures eating it in like a big, PR event. They're all lined up and they're eating this sort of older rice. And they've been quoted as saying, it's delicious and it's just as good as new rice, and it's lovely rice, basically. And this is maybe a very unfair comparison, but this did remind me a bit of, to use a British analogy, of John Selwyn Gummer. He, some years after the BSE, the mad cow disease crisis, which made British beef in the UK very tainted, and obviously to be recalled, and people were very much being put off from buying beef. He did like a big photo shoot some years later where he and his 4-year-old daughter, I believe, were photoed eating a beef burger to basically show, it's fine, there's nothing wrong with it, was the point they were trying to get across. So this photo of all the prime ministers eating this sort of older stockpiled rice and saying, it's delicious, it's good as new. Maybe it's not as serious a situation as BSE, but it sort of put me in mind of that moment. The fact that they're eating it personally and just assuring everyone that it's absolutely fine. But if you're releasing it and expecting people to buy it, that's the very minimum they should do. So it's good of them to do this big photo shoot and try and encourage it to get people buying. Now, there has been some pushback to this. For example, apparently some in the LDP are sort of a bit wary that Koizumi is being a little bit too aggressive, and they're worried, for example, about the impact this is going to have on, if you're releasing, along with other measures, if you're releasing sort of older rice and pushing down the prices, they're worried about the impact this is going to have on farmers, which is a key support element of the LDP. And as I say, there is an election coming up, and farmers in sort of rural constituencies who grow rice could very much be key for many of the seats that LDP are hoping to hold on to. So I can see sort of a pragmatic point of where they're coming from. But frankly, I think the LDP have, in my opinion, lost the luxury of caring about things like that, given the extent of the crisis, given how long it's gone for, and the fact that they've had to make one of their own ministers resign from joking that he himself doesn't buy rice. I think they're in real danger of losing the public opinion on this if they don't take very serious measures, if they haven't already. So I think they have to, there's no indication, as far as I'm aware, that they're looking to stop Koizumi, but they're just expressing concern. But I think they have to let go of those concerns, frankly, because I think you really do have to be aggressive about this, given how far the crisis has gone, and the optics of how badly it looks for the LDP. Also, to putting aside just the sheer concerns of the price in the shops and ordinary people, from a survival point of view, the LDP have to take this very seriously, in my opinion. So I think Koizumi's right to take it quite seriously, and we'll have to wait and see if this measure works. So that's been one element of pushback, has been people worrying about what's going to happen if you release all this rice and for Japanese rice growers. Another is that some retailers have expressed some concerns about the 2022 rice, despite the LDP coming out and saying, oh, it's just as good as new rice, it's delicious, it's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. Some retailers have expressed hesitancy and concern about the rice. Some have been quoted being worried about the taste, and also there's been concerns about whether the consumers will think, oh, the rice is, it's bad, it's not as good, could it harm our health? So there's been expressed concerns about the retailers taking it on, and apparently there's been some concern expressed from sort of smaller retailers. And really, you have to get this rice out everywhere. You have to avoid sort of gaps in supply. So you have to hopefully get pretty much all retailers to be willing to take it on if you're going to address this crisis. So we'll have to see just how widespread it will be and how much it will fill the supply gap. But hopefully, despite this reticence and concerns that a lot of retailers will take it on and lower the price, that would be very good for the consumer. And hopefully, this stockpiled rice proves to be absolutely fine and will resolve the crisis. That's what you have to hope for, regardless of what you think of the LDP, really. But we'll just have to wait and see on this and see if the crisis is resolved in a relatively short period of time. I think from the LDP point of view, before the July elections, they really have to hope to have turned things around, demonstrated competency on this, demonstrated that they can address this crisis and help people out. And I think that would really be the best thing for them, for their electoral future as well. And that would obviously be very impactful for Koizumi if he was to be the one to have come in, and he will have to adapt with it in a very rapid fashion to do it before the July elections. I think if he is able to do that, though, effectively, that could be absolutely massive for his CV, and it really could make him the man of the hour, really, and could be massive for his prospects if he still continues to hold ambitions to be the next Prime Minister and leader of the LPP as he did previously. So presumably he might well continue to do so as a young man. So really quite a big moment for him, really, and we'll have to see how this goes. Another thing I've thought about, perhaps, is there's still the ongoing trade talks with America going on. I have wondered out loud, sort of to myself, if this could maybe be a bit of a win-win situation, because one of the things Donald Trump is annoyed about is sort of the trade imbalance with Japan, and cars have been cited as a thing that he's bothered about. Japan exports a lot of cars to America, doesn't buy as many back. But I think perhaps that's maybe not the most suitable market for Japan, given that I think American cars are maybe, one factor is they're not the correct drive side. A lot of the ones manufactured, they're not sort of built to drive on the side of the road that the Japanese do. Maybe that's something that American cars could adapt to more. And also they're sort of quite large American cars, as American roads tend to be sort of large freeways. Americans tend to drive long distances, whereas sort of Japanese roads, in contrast, are a little bit small, and Japanese cars are quite small. And so maybe American cars aren't the most suitable for a Japanese market. So I've wondered if maybe there could be a bit of a win-win here with this temporary rice crisis. Maybe you could, for a short period of time, import, because Japan has, I believe, some degree of control over the amount of rice they import in. Maybe you could import in a sort of a special one-off deal to resolve this crisis, more American rice, lower the price, fill the short supply and address this crisis. And then you could point to that as an example of, well, we've brought in a lot of American rice. That's sort of a bit of a, for Japan, it's a very key market. It's a very important product. And we've sort of broken our traditional approach by importing in a lot of American rice as a one-off. And maybe, that would make Donald Trump happy as sort of one thing you could stack up in trade negotiations and say, oh, we've done this to redress the trade balance. And, sort of hope in a year or so if Japanese production returns that he'll forget about it and move on and be focused on some other issue. That's maybe a bit naive. Of course, I think it's a one-off crisis. Buying that American rice isn't going to solve the trade imbalance. But it's a token thing they could do. And of course, as has been shown with the concerns from some LDP about the effects of just releasing Japanese rice that's stockpiled and sort of aggressively trying to lower the price, can you imagine what the reaction would be if they were to import a lot of American rice, what Japanese rice growers and producers would think? There'd be a lot of unhappiness about this. But maybe that's... I haven't thought this through at all. It's purely off the top of my head, but maybe that's something that could be thought of in the short term, just to address this, sort of very prevalent crisis that just doesn't seem to be going away. But we'll have to see, how this current tack impact the LDP are taking does. And good luck to Koizumi. Hopefully he does manage to reduce the price and get more rice out there and solve things for the Japanese consumer. But yeah, that really rounds things up. I just wanted to give a quick focus with that update on sort of how impactful this current crisis is affecting the Japanese political situation, and sort of cover Koizumi's new job and following this resignation of a previous minister. But yeah, that really rounds out this quick show, guys. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the Japan Politics Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Whitaker, and sayonara, goodbye.